terminated immediately. So we discussed about that point, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
So, and we also discussed the reason behind that. So that is because like, so whenever like we are actually starting the Ubuntu image, so it is getting started, the image is getting started since it doesn't have like any work to do. So immediately it is getting killed. The container is getting killed. So the same thing is happening in your case also. So whenever like then we use like a Docker run, so -it, and then Ubuntu, and we mentioned like /bin and /bin bash, right? So we are asking this Docker to start this bash. So that is when like we were able to get into the container, and I executed like few Linux commands over there, like so creating the directory and other items. So hope like you missed that point. So you can just give it a try, or else like I'll simply show it now like quickly. So I'll be sharing my screen.
sorry to interrupt, Pavan. Just to inform everyone that I've just started the recording.
Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, so as I was mentioning, like so this will be your friend for the entire sessions. Like so you can use this cheat sheet. So in order to list all those containers that are actually running, like we can do like Docker PS.
Yes.
Okay, so and I don't have like any container running. And then I just wanted to see all the images. So Docker images. So I have like one image which I got it. Okay. So the first question. So what is the message like we are getting when we run this particular image? Docker run. This is the image. Right? So this is the message that we are getting like Docker is awesome.
Yes.
No, and we'll be getting the date time over here. Okay, so here like what is happening? So we are just running this message, running this container, and it is actually printing this message. So this doesn't mean that like I'm inside this container. So I'm still inside my laptop, right? Okay,
Local
so
PC.
so when you do like Docker PS, so we don't see like any container which is actually in running state. So if we see like Docker PS -a, so the, this is the first one, like, so this got created 37 seconds and it got exited in 32 seconds, like, okay. So immediately, like after printing this message, like it got exited. Okay. So the main task of this particular container is so to print this message, like we are not doing any background work inside this container. So that's the reason why like it started and then immediately it stopped. So now how do I, so the answer for the second question is Docker run. So I want to run this particular container in interactive mode. So that is when like you'll be able to get inside the container. So -it, and then so if you just do this, so it is just starting the container. That's it. Okay, so it is doing the same thing, like it is starting the container and then it is actually getting stopped. So when you just specify like whatever the task like you want to do. So here, like in this case, I want to start, I want to get inside the container and then start the shell. So now you can see that like I'm inside this Ubuntu root as a root user, like I'm inside this particular container. So now I can do like ls. So here, like you can see, so this is the folder name which I created. Okay. Okay. So any other questions from yesterday's session?
Pavan,
Yeah. Right.
we use um, dual commands like -it -d. Sorry, I find it. When we use.
I'll just show an example today. Like, so this is to run any container in the detached mode. So detached mode is nothing but the background mode. So I'll just in today's session, like I'll cover that in brief. Okay. So when we use this -it and -d, when we should actually run these containers in detached mode. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions like apart from this? So Nutana was saying something like, so she pinged me and then she said like, so Docker name command. So it is just for naming the container and it is not for renaming the container. Yes, Nutana. So you're correct. Like, so Docker name, name, it is for name property that is for just naming the container when we start this container. Okay. So you can see this cheat sheet. Okay. So this is the command that can be used for renaming the container. So whereas like name, it just specifies the name. So I can just show you the demo. Um, okay, so this will get started and it will get killed automatically. You can do docker ps -a. Yeah, so you can see the name, like, so this is the name. Okay. So if you want to rename a container, you should use like rename command. Okay.
Okay. And sir, I have tried the other command as well. So I see a container created with a status created. So when does a container will be created with that particular status created?
So immediately, like this is the life cycle. So yesterday, like we saw this thing, right? So immediately, like once we run this particular container, so the initial phase is like it gets created, the container gets created, and then it will be in running state. So once it is run with any task like in the running state, so then it gets exited automatically. Okay. So created is nothing but like when the command, when the container is actually created. So immediately, like after executing this Docker run command, like within the seconds, like, so if you just do that, like it will be in created state.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we can start container with name.
Yeah, so you can use this command. So if you just want to specify the name, you want to name the container, so you can use the name. So if there is already a container with the same name, so then in that case, like it will throw an error. Like even though, uh, so if you do like docker ps, so I don't have any running command containers, right? But if I use this particular command, so I'll get an error because like the container name Pavan test1 is already in use. Okay. The reason why like we get this error is so docker ps -a. So I have a container called container with this name Pavan test1 with the same name, right? Okay.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is in exited status. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So now if I want to start any exited status container, so you can use like docker start Pavan test. Okay. So you can just see. So even if it is starting, like it is getting killed immediately because it doesn't have like any job to do inside this container, right?
We don't want to remember container ID. We can simply put a name and we can start with that name.
Exactly. Like you can actually do that.
Sir, thank
Okay, so I have like a lot. So today's session, like let's get started. So I have, if you see, so I have like a lot of these containers in stopped state, exited state, right? I just want to clean up all these containers. Okay. So in order to remove any containers, so the command like so managing the container. So deleting a container, this is the command like docker rm -f. So if we want to forcibly kill a container. So this is the command. Like if we want to kill it a container gracefully, then we can use this command like docker rm. Okay. So I'll just delete docker rm -f, and then I want to delete this container. Okay, for one test. Okay, it gets deleted. So it is not actually present. But there are like you can see like almost 20 plus 20 to 30 containers which are in exited state, right? I cannot go and delete all these commands, all these containers individually, right? So I can simply execute this command docker rm -f. Okay, I'll be specifying like docker r. So before that, I'll show you one thing. Docker ps -a. So this is the output of docker ps -a, right? So you're getting all these items like
Running.
container ID, image name, and all these things. But if you just pass this particular variable, like so -q, So there are no running commands -a. So docker ps -a is nothing but like it lists all the exited commands, all the exited containers, right? So now if you do like docker ps -a -q, it just lists only all those container IDs. Okay. So now what I can actually do is so docker rm -f dollar, and then I can just specify this docker ps -a -q. So this is nothing but like I'm just passing the output of this particular command. Like the output of this particular command is nothing but like I'll be getting all these container IDs which are in exited state, right? So I'll be passing this list to docker rm -f instead of deleting each of these containers individually. I can do this. Okay, so it got successfully executed, and you can see docker ps -a, and I don't have any containers in exited state also. Okay, no running containers and no exited containers. Okay. So this is to delete these containers. Usually like these are the steps like which follow, right? So we want to clean up all these containers. And similar way, like if we want to delete an image, so docker images. So I have like one particular image, right? So if I want to delete any images, so the same similar kind of image syntax like docker rmi. The difference between like deleting a container and then deleting an image is so you need to specify I for image. RMI is for image and RM is for containers. Okay. Docker RMI -f. So I can just specify this. So if these are like generally unique values, so you can just specify 1 or 3 letters and it will automatically delete that. Like it's not required to completely enter this also. Like okay, so it got untagged and it got deleted. Docker images. Okay, so you can see I don't have like any images. So anyone like they want to try these commands on your machine. So it's 1:45. I'll give like 3 minutes.
No, a question.
Yeah.
If you want to delete randomly, is there any possible to do?
So randomly in the sense like out of 20, you want to delete like a few.
Yes, yes.
Uh, even I don't know. So
Just
let's
by
do
entering
one.
comma separated also.
I mean, so Docker
Hmm.
yes, top 10 containers. Let's do a quick Google search. No, I didn't actually find it like in the first list. Okay. So maybe
Okay,
like
okay.
Naidu, you can actually try that and then you can let us know. So usually
Sure.
if we are able to get this like top 10 items from here or random items from this particular command, so you can just pass them to this docker rm -f. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, so if you are able to get these random results from this command, like you'll be obviously able to delete these random images. Or else like as Karthik specified, like you can just do a docker ps and then copy these items like randomly.
Okay, with comma separated, right?
Comma separated, I never tried it.
Okay.
You just try it and then let me know. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this is the life cycle of this container. So what basically like we create an image, we pull an image, and then or we create an image from the Docker file, and then we run that particular image, which will actually create a container. And the container has it starts with in the created state, and then running state, and then exited state when it is stopping. Okay, these I'll cover them today. And then managing the containers, like in order to list all the containers, running containers, so you need to do like docker ps. So to show like all containers like -a. So this shows like both exited containers as well as like running containers. Okay. So if you want to delete a container, docker rm container, the container name. So docker container prone. So this is nothing but like if you want to delete all the stopped containers, so you can simply execute this command. Okay. So stop a running container. So this is not for deleting a container, but it is to stop a container. Okay, so if there is a container that is running in the background, so you can use this command to stop this container. Okay, so yeah, the same way like to start a stopped container. Okay, so you can just execute this command like docker start and start this command. So today, like we'll cover like few more items. So the volumes and then exposing the ports and then running our web application. Like so, first let's try to run a small web application using the Nginx server. Okay. So let's go ahead and then create like an Nginx server. And basically like this is a self-documented one. Like so whenever like you want to use a particular container, so it's almost like a self-documented. So if you follow this document properly, like you'll be able to create like so whatever you want. Like okay. So but let's try to use this Nginx server. Okay, so I think like most of you are familiar with Nginx, right? So Sandhya and Devna, I think like you might not be. But others like you
Yeah.
are familiar with this, right?
Yes.
Can someone just let me know like what Nginx is used for?
అని నేను చెప్పమంటావా?
వద్దులే.
Okay.
Yeah, others can just give it a try. Like so, mostly like, um, so I'll just give it. I'll explain it. Okay. So Nginx is nothing but like it's just like another web server. Like you'll see like multiple web servers. Like all the Java folks, like they might be using Apache Tomcat server or JBoss server, right? So these are all the web servers. Similarly, like people working on .NET, like they'll be using like this thing like so IAS servers, right? Um, so the same way like Nginx is again like another web server like which can be used to deploy all this HTML pages and all this stuff. Okay, so there are like a lot many users of this Nginx server, but right now like we are not dealing with Nginx classes, right? So I'll not go deep into that. But Nginx is just used for hosting like any website or I mean hosting a website kind of thing. Okay.
In Ubuntu,
Yeah, Raju.
in Ubuntu, we can use it Nginx.
Yeah,
In
so
Ubuntu
in
or
Ubuntu we
Linux.
can use Nginx, but I think like even in .NET like you can also use Nginx, but it's popular in the Ubuntu world mostly. Okay, so what I'll do. So first thing I should actually do is like I can actually pull this particular Nginx image. Okay. So I'm just pulling this Nginx image. So Sandhya and them, so web servers are nothing but like, so for example, like we are actually browsing this Google or any of these websites, right? So basically like these websites, they are hosted on a web server. Okay. And there are softwares like Nginx and then IAS or Tomcat servers and many more, like which actually serves our request. Like whenever we enter this URL in the browser, so it will be sent to the web server, and then the web server will actually process the request, and it serves appropriate web pages, okay, to us in a way.
Okay. Okay, Anna.
Yeah, so we pulled this Nginx image. So let's see like Docker images. So this is the image name like Nginx. Okay. So now I just want to run this particular Nginx Docker. So what's the command to run an image? Can someone prompt me?
Docker run -it.
So -it is not always required. Like it is whenever like you want to run it in the interactive mode. Okay. So interactive mode is nothing but like if you want to get into this particular container or interact with it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Docker
So
run,
Docker
then image ID.
Yeah, so Docker run and then the image ID. So this is the image ID, right? I can simply run this command. So you can actually see this. So this is it started running. Okay. So Nginx started. It is actually outputting few of these logs. So basically, like whenever like we start this Nginx server or any web server, so basically like the port number that is exposed by these servers, web servers, is nothing but like 80 port. Okay, all these web servers like they run on 80 port. So now let's see what we ran this Nginx server, right? Docker PS. Okay, so I have this particular Nginx server up and running. So this is the image ID, right? 12766A. And then the command, like this is the entry command. It got created like almost like 40 seconds back, and it is still running in running state. Okay, and you can actually see the port that is exposed is 80 TCP port. Okay, so whenever like when we call any of these URLs, like so basically like what we do is like so google.com or something like that. So this is the host name and which gets translated to an IP address. Okay. And this IP address, like it looks something like this. So it can be something like 192.194.1.1.0 or something like that. And this is the IP address. And then we have a port associated with this. So if we don't specify any port, the default port is always 80 for HTTP, all these web servers. Okay. But if we specify like any of these port numbers like 81, 82 or 822 or whatever it might be, so it is getting exposed on this particular port. Okay. So this is the IP address and then this is the port number. Whenever like we enter like any google.com or something like that. Okay. So each of these addresses like URLs, like they have this IP address associated with them. Like, okay, so this is called as like a DNS entry. So it gets like this name actually gets resolved to an IP address. Okay. So the same way, like when we host an application like a website or anything like that, so we basically have IP addresses for our servers, and then we just register them somewhere with this name. Okay. So i9.hitech.com, it gets translated to some IP address in the background. Okay. So we can see that Nginx is running on port 80. Okay, so when it is running on the port 80, so can I just like try localhost and then see? So I'll see localhost or so it is not running like 127.0.0.1. Okay, so previously it was actually cached. So you can see that the site can't be reached. Okay, but here I see this Nginx server is running on port 80. Okay, so what is happening? So why I'm not able to access here? Like, so when I'll try with 80. Okay, so even with 80, 80 is the default port, so that's why it's not required to specify 80 like this. Okay, so still I'm not able to access this website, but from my Docker PS command, like I'm able to see that Nginx is actually running behind the scenes. Okay, now let's get into the container and then see. So this is my container, right? So how do we get into this container? Any thoughts?
Docker run.
Container.
Docker run and then the container ID, right? Yeah. So ideally -IT is for interactive mode. Yeah. So you're partially correct, but Docker run, this is for starting a container, but it is not for getting into a container which is already running. Okay. So this is
Okay.
for starting a container. Like when you run the docker run command, so it will start another container. Okay, another
Okay.
Nginx container, but it will not get you inside this particular container. So it will get you inside this container when you use docker run and specify -it, but it is actually a new container, not an existing container. Okay. So what do I need to do? So this is the new command, docker exec -it interactive mode, and then the container name. And what do you want to start? Like /bin/bash. Okay, so I want to get into the shell. So docker run. So this you should actually note. So docker run is for starting a container. Okay, it's not for getting inside a container. So if the container is already in running state, you should use like docker exec. And this is clear, right?
Yes.
Okay, now let's see. I already know that this is actually running. Like okay, so my Docker it is running, and Naidu, like if you see when I executed this command like docker run, okay, so
Okay.
it's in running mode.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'll not be able to enter like any further commands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
So I'll not be able to type anything or I'll not be able to do anything. So it's in running mode. So if I want to type the next command, so if I just do Control C, this Control C is not actually working, but ideally it should work. So this is in the running mode. Okay.
Okay.
Now I'm inside this container, right? So the in one tab, like this is still in running mode, and in another tab, like what I'm actually doing. So I just got into this container, the running container. Okay. So now let's see like if this particular website is actually running inside the container or not. Okay. So what's the command like W? So in order to do that, like we can use like wget. So Karthik, correct me, like I'm very bad at like Ubuntu commands. So help me out with this. Any Ubuntu commands. So wget
Okay.
will work, right?
wget, or can you try ping 127.0.0.1?
127.0.0.1 port number. Okay. So ping is not actually working. So why it's not working? So basically, this ping might actually work on regular Ubuntu, but it is not actually working on our container like Nginx container. So this Nginx container was also built on top of this Ubuntu, but still it is not working, the ping command. The reason why it is not actually working here is in the first session, like we discussed about it, because like in the virtual machines, what are we doing? Like we are installing the complete OS in the virtual machine, right? But in the containers, we are not doing that. So in the containers, it is something like this. So we are actually copying only the binaries that are required for starting this container. So we are not actually installing the entire OS. So that is the reason why like most of the commands like which you use on regular Ubuntu machines like Ubuntu OS, so they'll not be available. Like most of those commands, like even you cannot use like VI or nano, even nano command, they are not available. Okay. So I'll also try wget 127.0.0.1. Even this is not available. Like so apt get install update. I should do update. So I'm updating this particular Ubuntu container. I'm inside the container and updating this particular Ubuntu container. I'm in the Nginx container. Okay, so it got updated. apt get install wget. So this is nothing but like we are installing a software. Like so, these are all Ubuntu commands. So you can actually go through this some of these commands like Ubuntu commands in the internet. Okay, so this is just for installing the wget package. So wget is nothing but like it is used for downloading or making any HTTP calls from the Ubuntu terminal. So meanwhile, when this is getting installed, like anyone, like, do you have any questions for me till now?
No, just repeat two commands.
Okay. Which two commands?
Docker. The difference between Docker execute command like exec -it and Docker run it.
Okay, I'll show you.
The remaining thing is similar, like container ID /bin -bash.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
Just once repeat those two.
Yeah. So once this is done, like I'll just, or I'll take another PowerShell and then.
Pavan, how can we find a list of binaries in a container?
A list of binaries, like when you get inside this container, you can actually do ls command, like so all these binaries. And so basically like we don't actually need to know that in depth. So because like this is just like the Linux kernel that is actually copied, like.
Okay.
So if we are from Ubuntu background and then I mean we are from the Linux and then so if we are like much familiar with these things, so then we can actually understand. But ideally, like I'm not from the Linux background and I'm from the Windows, all double clicking and next.
Okay.
So but basically like you can actually see, for example, I'll show it to you. I'll open another terminal. So Naidu, I'll also cover your point. So Docker PS, you see this is the container ID which is already in running state, right?
Okay.
So if I want to get inside this container, I need to do, let's try like Docker run and then container ID. So it is saying like unable to find this image locally and it is trying to download this image from a Docker Hub. So basically like if you see what is the command for Docker run. So Docker run is nothing but like it is expecting an image name.
Okay.
Okay. So we can create like multiple images from the same Docker image. You're clear about that, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
So Docker run is mainly for creating a container from an image. Okay. And in that process, like if you specify, and what's the image name? So 127, right? So in this process, like if you specify -it, you are able to start this with in the interactive mode.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So if you run this command like docker run -it and then the image name, and then you're specifying like /bin and bash. So what you're saying is, so you're instructing Docker to create a container out of this image and start it in the interactive mode. Okay. So whenever like you're specifying the interactive mode, so you're supposed to specify like bin/bash. I mean, so whatever the program like you want to start invoke. Okay. So usually like in order to get into the container, we should use like bin bash or sh. Okay. So here what it is actually doing, it is going to create another container. So we already have one container created out of this image, right? So when you execute this particular command, it will create another container. Okay. So another Nginx container. So this is the run command, like, but if I want to get inside an already running container, so if I want to get inside this already running container, so that is when like you're supposed to use docker exec.
Okay.
-it and then the container name. Okay. Okay. Exec, it requires,
-bash.
yeah. So, and Ramesh, like you're asking about the list of binaries, right? So you can actually do ls and then you'll be able to see all these things like bin boot. So these are the some of the libraries. So again, like so going into the Linux basics, so each of these folder names, so they have a specific purpose. Like so all the libraries like which we install, they go into this lib and then bin, I think like any binaries. So boot is nothing but like for any boot level information files, I think like. So, and this is all like the Linux part. Okay. But what we need to understand is, so you can actually see. So you can actually see Docker images. So it is just like 142 MB. Okay, this is Nginx. Okay, so it is just like 142 MB. So this is built on top of Ubuntu. Okay, again. But there are like other versions, like Alpine versions, so you can actually see.
Actually, I asked because you're saying binaries will be occupying less space compared to the virtual machine, this thing. So
Yeah.
If we know the binaries and their space, so we can get an idea that this much less space it is using, like that.
Obviously, like, so if you see this Docker pull, I'll use this Ubuntu. So you can see the size of this Ubuntu image. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So you can see Docker images. Okay.
Okay.
So you can see this Ubuntu image is of size like 72 MB just. Okay. And there are like other versions of Ubuntu. So you can see like this is the Alpine version. So a minimal Docker image based on Alpine Linux. Okay. So this is again like another image. And this is very lightweight one. Okay. So it's just like 5 MB.
Okay.
Docker full. And again, like this is another Linux version, Linux OS kind of thing.
Okay.
So this is just like 5.57 MB. Even if we download a song like MP3 song, so it is more than like 5.7 MB. Like even a picture like which we take with the DSLR camera, like it is almost like 10 MB or something like that. Okay.
Yes.
But with 5 MB, like you're able to get an OS. Okay. So I can actually run this particular Alpine OS, Alpine. So this is my image, right? Docker ps docker run -it image name and then /bin/bash.
I think this is the best advantage of Docker.
Exactly. And another advantage is like, so if you want to, so even if you see this doesn't have like a bash installed. Okay. So this has like shell sh. Okay. So if you see, this is the directory structure inside this thing. Like, so how this is less space, how this is occupying like less space when compared to the actual Ubuntu image, because here like they are not providing even the binaries or softwares that are present in this Ubuntu image. Okay, so it is even very minimal. Okay. And if you want to install like bash or any software, so you should actually install them on this particular machine, like. And then so the space actually gradually increases. Whenever like you're loading more softwares into this Alpine version, so the size actually gradually increases. Okay. Yeah, and Naidu, like coming back to your question, so that is when like we use Docker run, and whenever like we want to use Docker, we want to get inside an already running container, so we use like exec.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, it's clear, right?
Clear.
Okay. Okay, so here like wget got installed. So wget.
Karthik sent some comments in our chat.
Okay, let me check that. See, you can actually see. So whenever like I'm calling this thing, like so wget, and then this is my local. So when local host and 127.0.01, so these are alias names. Okay, so when either you specify local host or 127.0.0.1, so it actually works. And since I just showed it to you, right? Yes. This is running in port 80. Okay. So I can just confirm that, like, so whenever I'm able to make a wget and then call the IP address localhost with port 80. So if I don't specify any port number, it takes like 80 as default. So it served me like I got like index.html. So this Nginx server is actually running behind the scenes, so that we are clear.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes.
But how do I expose? Like, so if I want to access, so every time, like if I want to see these websites, like any website which is running in the Docker, so I can't get inside this container and just execute this wget to see or any other commands to see what's the content, right? So even you don't have like a browser present inside this Ubuntu. Okay, so it is not a GUI thing, like it is just like a terminal. So how do we expose that? So that is where like this port comes into picture, like, okay, so mapping a particular port. So now I'll make this change. So now I do like when I close the terminal, like other terminal, okay. So what is happening? I'll execute docker ps again. I close that other terminal where Nginx was actually running, right? So you can see the container got stopped. Okay. So that is because it is running. So it is not running in the detached mode. So docker run or image name Nginx. Docker run 127. So again, I'll just show it to you. So whenever you do docker run, so it is running in the interactive mode. So it is actually, I'm not able to get out of this container. So if I'm trying to get out of this container, so if I'm actually closing this thing, okay, I'll show you other thing. So it is running in this particular PowerShell window, right? So whenever I do like docker ps, so I'm able to see one container which is in running state. Okay, but when I close this thing, when I close this first terminal, so it is saying like it exited. And now when I do docker ps, so I'm not seeing that container. But ideally, like you don't want to do the same thing, right? So you want this Nginx server to be running in the background mode or something like that, right? So you can't always keep your machine like open, like your terminal open, right? This is where like -d comes into picture. Like when you do -d, this is the detached mode. Okay, the container started and you are again back to your terminal. Okay, so now if you see docker ps, you can still see that this particular container is actually running state.
Yes.
So that is where like -d comes into picture. Like if you want to run it in detached mode, so you can use like -d.
Okay.
So most of the times, like we'll be using like -d. So we don't want to get stuck. So now if you want to see the logs, so previously, like when I'm running docker run and then the Nginx image ID, so you saw some logs right here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if you want to see those logs, so there is a command like docker logs, and then this is the container ID. You can see these logs. OK, whatever was printed previously. So the same thing is printing now. It is actually printed here. OK, so if you want to see these logs again, like if you want to get inside this container, what's the command?
In container.
So get inside this container. Like if I want to go inside this container.
Docker.
Docker.
Docker
exec.
Yeah. So docker
Container.
exec is the command to get inside this container. OK.
Container.
And
So now we can see this particular container is actually running docker ps. So this is running, right? So
Yeah.
if you want to stop this container, so previously like I closed this window and then the container got stopped. So but now if I want to stop this container, I should use docker stop the container ID. Okay, it got stopped. There are no running containers. Okay,
We
so
can start also like that, kadan. Docker start.
yeah, so you can also
Container.
start like this. Docker start. So Docker yes. So it is in running state now again. Okay. So this is what is happening. But coming back to our question, like, so how do I access this particular? So we saw that whenever we are running this container, like Nginx container, a default Nginx piece is actually getting a running. It is running, right? So, but how do I access that particular URL like from outside, like not from inside the Docker container, but I want to access it from my host machine. So how do I do that? Okay. So I'll stop this container. So whenever you start this, like Docker run -d in the detached mode I'm running. So there is an option called as port. So map a port. Okay. So what's the syntax? Like Docker run -p. I'm running in detached mode. So that is the reason why I'm using -d, -p and host port. So what is the port which I want to expose on my host machine? And what is the port on the container which I want to expose? Okay. So I want to host like 1234 with port 80. So I want to expose like 1234 on my host machine with 80 port running on this particular image on this container. Okay, so let me execute this. So it started, right? It got executed. Docker yes. So now you can see this port like on my host machine 1234 is actually pointing to 80 port in the container. So now I'll do localhost 1234. So now you can actually see this. Welcome to Nginx. So this is the default web page that Nginx provides. OK. So if I use 80 here, this will not work again. OK, so the site can't be reached because I'm exposing port number 1234 on my host machine. So I'm saying Docker that on my laptop, port number 1234 should be pointing to port number 80 on the container. OK. So here on my laptop, like I'm using like 1234 and the Docker will actually point to port number 80 in the container. So is this clear?
Pavan, can you repeat it once?
Okay. So you understood the problem, right? So without actually specifying this -p, so previously like we didn't give this -p. In that scenario, what happened? Like we used to get like only TCP IP in the ports in the TCP 80 TCP. Okay. That means
Yes.
this port 80 is exposed in the Docker container, is open in the Docker container. Okay. So in that case, like what I did, like I had to get inside this particular container, like Nginx container, and there like I installed wget and I executed like wget like 127.0.0.1, okay, with port 80. And there I'm able to find like this index.html, it is called. Okay. So just to confirm that like Nginx server is up and running in this case. So what I did, like I got inside this container and then I executed like wget command. Like so wget is nothing but like so in from the browser, like we are entering this, right? So from terminal, like if you want to call a web page or something like that, download something like we can use like wget. It's one of the options. So, but ideally, like every time, like if you want to deploy your application, like web application website, and you don't want to get inside this container and execute, right? So that is not is expected. So you should be able to host, I mean, access this website, which is hosted in the Docker container from outside. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
Sanjay, what do you say?
Yes, Pavan.
So 80 is the port which is running inside this Docker container. but I want to access the same port, I mean this website which is present inside the Docker container from my host machine. Host machine is nothing but like my laptop.
Yes.
So in order to do that, what do we need to do? Like we need to use this command, like you need to use like -p, this option -p, and then you need to specify whatever the host name you want to provide on, I mean the host name that you want to map. I mean the port number which you want to map from the host name, host machine. Okay. And then this is my Docker one, 80. So when I just executed this, so it is saying like this 1234 on your host machine. So this is actually pointing to port 80 on the Docker container. So if I execute this thing like another one, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 7. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 7. Okay, yes. So now you can see there are two different containers that are running, like both of them are Nginx containers. So you can see like here, like 1, 2, 3, 7 is getting exposed. Here 1, 2, 3, 4 is getting exposed.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. So I can actually, so along with this, I can also execute this 1, 2, 3, 7.
7 also.
So both of them will work. 1, 2, 3, 7 is working as well as like 1, 2, 3, 4 is also working. So let's make a small change. Okay. So now you understood, right, Sanjay? So what's the advantage of exposing this port?
Yes, Pavan.
Yeah.
Now clear, Pavan.
Okay. Okay. So let's do one thing. So I'll get inside this one of this container, maybe 1, 2, 3, 7 Docker exec -it, and then the container name /bin/bash. Okay. So I'll change this default.html. Ideally, like I don't actually know this path, but somewhere it will be here. So this is the place where like this particular file is actually present in the next file, the HTML page, which HTML file which we are looking at. So here, this is the index.html, right? Nano index.html. So nano is the command like which is used for editing a file in Ubuntu. So some of these commands are like Ubuntu commands. Okay. Even I'm not an expert in this Ubuntu commands. Okay. Some of the basic commands I know. So here, like you can see again, like nano is not actually present. So I need to install nano. Unable to look at the package. So we should update first. These are like Ubuntu commands, apt get update and then apt get install nano. So nano is like our text notepad kind of thing. Okay. So to edit any files. So I'll edit this nano index.html. Okay. Welcome to Docker session files. So Control O and then Control X. Okay. So I just changed this index.html. Okay. And then I exited out of this container. So you should closely follow this or else like you'll miss. Okay. So again, like, so inside which container I change this HTML file. So I change this HTML file in this F3 FD0. F3 FD0. This is the one, right? And what's the port number? 1237. Now let me execute this 12371. So you can see welcome to Docker session at sales. In the other container, it is still showing like welcome to Nginx. So do you have any questions like why this is happening and how this is happening? Or if you want me to repeat, I'll repeat also, no issues. Like just let me know.
Pavan once repeated.
So okay. So what I am actually doing, so you understood this, right? So what I did, like here from the same image, like from the same Nginx image, like I'm creating two different containers. It is just like you're creating like two different, you're copying like so since I mentioned like in the starting sessions, so you can create like n number of containers from an image. Okay. So in this case, like we created two images. And another beauty of Docker is, so all these containers, they are isolated. They run in isolation. Okay. So any changes like which you made in one container, so they are independent to that particular container itself. Like you cannot actually those changes, they don't get reflected in another container. Okay, so they are isolated. So in this case, what I'm actually doing, so I'm actually creating like two different containers, and then I went inside like one of this container, like okay, this particular container, and after going into this container, I I modified this HTML file. So this is being served from index.html file. Again, like you can ask me like, how did you know this path and everything? Like, so this is the path. Like a little bit of experience in Nginx would actually make you understand this. But just understand the concept. Like don't worry about this Nginx and all this stuff. Okay. So I went inside this container and then I modified. Like I went to this particular path. Okay. So user share Nginx and HTML. Here, this is the index.html file. Okay. I did like nano index.html. Nano is nothing but like it is to edit any files. Basically, like you don't actually find this nano on any of these Ubuntu containers. Okay, so you need to install that nano tool. Okay, so in order to install that, like you need to do apt-get update and then apt-get install nano. Okay, so after installing nano, like I'm able to edit this index.html, and what I did is like, so I changed the text from this welcome to Nginx. So I changed this text from welcome to Nginx to welcome to Docker session at sales. Okay, so this is the change like which I made. So in which container did I make the change? I made the change in this container. Okay, I went inside this container and I made the change. Since these two containers, they are isolated. So that is the basic property of Docker. So how many containers you run from a particular single image? So they all run in isolation mode. Okay, so any changes that were made inside this container, they don't reflect in this container. Okay. So since I made this change only in this container, which is exposed from port 1237, so I'm seeing this message like, so when I'm executing like 1237 localhost 1237, so I'm seeing this message. Whereas like when I'm using this port like 1234, since I didn't make any change to the index.html file inside this container, so I'm seeing like the default message. Is it clear?
Yes or no?
So it is nothing but like I'm going inside this container and I'm making some changes. So all these changes, they get reflected only in this port. Okay. So is this clear?
Yes.
Clear, Pavan.
Yeah. So just a quick
once,
yeah.
once make a change in the port 1234 also.
You want me to make the change in 1234 also?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll do one thing, like I'll create another container. Okay. So Docker run in the detached mode. 127 is my image name. And I want to expose the port. I'm running a new container of this same Nginx image like -p. And on my host machine, I want to expose it on 81, and then 8181 or something like that. And then this is my port number on Docker 80. Okay.
it will create automatically another
Docker,
container.
yes. Yeah, so since I'm using like Docker run, so it is creating another container, 8181 and 80 port. Okay. Now when I do 8181 on my host machine, so I'm seeing the default message, right? Welcome to Nginx.
Yes.
Okay. So now, as per Sandhya's request, like I want to make a change to the default page that is being served. So this is my container name. So what should I do? So I should get inside this container minus IT container name and slash bin slash bash. Okay. So this index.html, which is being served by Nginx, so it is actually present in this path. So I should actually go into that particular path and I'll do ls. So I'm able to find this index.html. So I need to edit this particular index.html, right? I'll do nano index.html. Okay, but it is saying like nano is not found command. But
You need to install.
so I need to install apt get install. We need to do
We need
update.
update.
apt get install nano. Okay, so it got installed, right? So again, I can try this command like nano index.html. So since Sandhya asked for this request, like welcome to Nginx by Sandhya. So save this file, Control O, and then Control X. So the file got changed. So if you want to see the change again, like welcome to Nginx by Sandhya. Okay, so I modified this particular file, right? So Sandhya, like you can actually, so in which container did I make the change? This 8181 container, right?
Yes.
So let me execute this. So you can see this. Welcome to Nginx by Sandhya.
Okay, Pavan.
So I'll just exit out of this container. So this is was just one way of actually making any changes. So getting inside this container and then making those changes. But it is always not required to get inside this container and make those changes. So we can also use volumes. So in tomorrow's session, like we'll see these topics like further. Okay. Yeah. So now any questions from today's session or any queries, like just let me know. I'll give like another 5 minutes. 5-10 minutes, like we can actually discuss some questions. So even if you didn't understand any topic, like just let me know. I'll try to cover this like in 1-2 minutes. So today we covered this run and then this thing like exposing a port using this command. And we also saw the detached mode. Okay, so these we'll see tomorrow. We saw these commands like ps -a rm, removing a container, and then stopping a container, starting a container. We also saw this Docker exec. Okay, so how to get inside this container, like running container. So you can try this rename one. So we also saw this logs. Okay, any questions?
No.
Okay. Okay then. So I think like Shruti, we can wrap this session.
Okay, Pavan. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pavan.
Thank you.